A Map of Eternity. A quick guide to Egyptian mythology. Picture yourself stepping into a cool, dim hall where the walls immediately start talking. Bird-bodied souls drift above a boat. Hands lift a solar disk. A jackal-headed god checks the needle of a scale. A king offers a tiny figure of Maat, the very idea of order, to powers you can't see but somehow feel. Reliefs and inscriptions aren't decoration here. They are instructions. How the world is put together, why the sun rose today, and what must be done so it rises tomorrow. How to live so that a heart remains light. Why the king is not just a ruler, but a harmonizer between people, gods, and the Nile. This opening chapter is not a catalog of gods, but a map. It explains how to read Egyptian myths so that you hear not exoticism, but the strict logic of one of the longest-lived civilizations. Start with something simple. Egyptian mythology is a language of repeatability. The Nile swells and retreats. Grain dies in the soil and returns as bread. The sun vanishes into an unseen realm and appears again. For this repeatability to hold, humans and gods must keep the rhythm together. Present food to a cult statue. Repair canals. Check market measures. Tell the truth in court. Avoid excess at feasts, and do the day's work. Egyptians called this kept measure, Maat cosmic order, justice, truthfulness, and the sense that everything stands in its proper place. Maat isn't a punishing goddess so much as a living reminder. Behave as if the world were a neatly ordered workshop, and you are responsible for your bench, your tools, and your word. Keeping rhythm is not enough. You must understand the orchestra, hence the presence of multiple creation stories. In Heliopolis, a primeval mound rises from Nun's waters. Atop it, Atum, often identified with Ra, engenders the Ennead, Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, Geb and Nut, earth and sky, and their children, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. In Memphis, a different optic. Ta creates by heart and tongue, thought and speech, so that a designed, named thing becomes a real thing. In Hermopolis, the Ogdoad speaks not in characters, but in qualities, darkness, water, boundlessness, hiddenness, from whose balance light is born. In Thebes, the hidden one, Amun, fuses with the solar Ra as Amun-Ra, explaining why the New Kingdom's capital claims a special ritual gravity. The apparent paradox that multiple beginnings coexist dissolves once you see them as different projections of the same volume. How land first rose from water, how thought assigns names and places, which qualities must be harmonized so the world keeps afloat. The second grand theme is the solar journey. By day, Ra sails his barque across the sky. At evening he descends, and at night traverses 12 hours of the Duata realm of gates, fiery lakes, serpents, password inscriptions, and crucially, a meeting with Osiris. At dawn, having overcome Apophis, the serpent of chaos and unmeasure Ra, is born again. This is more than poetry. Temple calendars, processions, prayers, even work schedules along the Nile synchronize with the sky's timetable. Priests do not appease gods. Together with artisans and farmers, they service the cosmic infrastructure. A key rule follows. In Egypt, myth and administration do not run in parallel. Festivals are knots in the year that renew the social contract of order. Offerings are not bribes, but the fuel of repeatability. The third theme is the Osirian myth, where death and rule are explained at once. Seth kills Osiris. Isis finds and reassembles his body, and conceives a son by him, Horus, the heir. What follows is a long, serial conflict of trials and combats between Horus and Seth over the right to rule. Horus prevails. Osiris becomes Lord of the Dead. This is at once a personal salvation script. As Osiris I will rise, if preserved, named, and correctly guided, and a constitutional model. The king is Horus on earth, and is legitimate so far as he upholds Maat and curbs chaos, Dolbeintfat, desert winds, theft, lies, disorder. Hence the strict but transparent rituals of renewing royal force, including the said festival. Hence those scenes where the king presents a small figure of Maat. We offer you order itself. Our gifts are not random largesse, but measured law. A fourth theme is the duat and the weighing of the heart. The afterlife is not a nightmare maze, but a learnable route with cues. From the earliest pyramid texts, inscribed in royal tombs of the 5th to 6th dynasties, to the Book of the Dead, Egyptian texts are functional manuals: how to pass gates, what to say to guardians, which names of beings and places to speak, so you are not devoured by them. The central episode is the weighing of the heart. Anubis places the heart on one scale against the feather of Maat. Thoth records. Nearby waits Ammit, the devourer, if the heart is too heavy. The negative confession is not a magical loophole, but a checklist. I have not cheated in measure. I have not stolen from the god. I have not stopped water from flowing. Ritual does not cancel ethics. Ethics makes ritual truthful. A fifth theme asks who keeps this system running on Earth. The pharaoh, living Horus, son of Ra, is not a biological claim but an obligation. Chief steward of Maat, servant and patron of the temples. The temple is a cosmos in miniature. Pylons as mountains, courts and hypostyle halls as the marshy thicket of first waters. And, at the center, the naos, where the cult statue, the body of presence, is bathed, clothed, and fed to maintain rhythm. Around it lie the sacred lake, workshops, granaries, and the house of life a school, archive, infirmary, and scriptorium. Festivals bring the hidden out into the streets, so the city sees order working. The Opet festival ferries Amun from Karnak to Luxor. The beautiful feast of the valley stitches together the living and the dead across the river. This is not spectacle. It's the city's metronome. To keep from drowning in names and epithets, use a 5-key rule for reading. Key 1, rhythm. Almost everything beats in time. Day and night. Ra's voyage. Year, flood, sowing, harvest. Kingship, renewal rites, human life, birth. Name, maturity. Death, vindication. When chaos strikes, drought, plague, war, the answer is not frenzy, but the restoration of cadence. Offerings, canal repairs, honest measures. Temple routine is less opiate than times tables, dull if recited, indispensable if you need to add. Key 2, measure, Maat. Every myth draws a line for power. Sekhmet punishes, but her rage must be turned to healing. Seth destroys, yet without his desert nature, borders, and military force would fail. The culture's taste for balance shows everywhere. Mirrored reliefs, paired deities, the two lands, the double crown. Even a double-entry flavor in temple accounting. Key 3, name and image. Words create, images work, but only in a chain of correct acts. When a relief shows the king giving Maat, it is both theater and a legal formula. I acknowledge and maintain order. On that basis, I request the country's welfare. Speaking of formula is like opening a sluice at the set hour. Key 4, place. Myths are geographical. Heliopolis is solar creation. Memphis is craft, and the speech of Ptah. Abydos is Osiris's port. Thebes is late power and liturgy, Amun-Ra. Dendera is Hathor, joy and renewal. Edfu is Horus the defender. Our route follows this sacred map. Stories belong to temples and processions, which are not local quirks, but letters in a common alphabet. Key 5, translatability. Egyptian religion fuses gods, Amun-Ra, assembles triads, Ta, Sokar, Osiris, and recognizes itself in foreign forms, later Serapis, Isis across the Mediterranean. This is not vagueness, but resilience. A system that recombines roles without breaking rules tends to last. What comes next? Part 2 unfolds the mornings of the world, why there are several, how they interlock, and how they legitimize particular cities and temples. Part 3 boards the solar barque through the hours of night, what gates stand there, who holds down Apophis, why dawn is an achievement, not a cliché. Part 4 lays out the Osirian cycle, from law and inheritance to trial and compromise. Part 5 walks the duat with its formulas and ethics. Part 6 enters the temple as a working machine who keeps the schedule, how inventories and festivals re-stitch a city. Part 7 maps the pantheon as an architecture of roles rather than a menagerie of heads. Part 8 follows the long afterlife of Egyptian signs from Ptolemaic syntheses to modern culture. To keep our feet on the ground, consider one concrete scene. In Thebes, during Opet, Amun's barque leaves the Naus, rides the Nile, or moves along the processional road, to Luxor. The king's life force is renewed, and the city's tomorrow is secured. This is not a pretty parade, but lubricant for a large machine. Equally concrete are the texts. The earliest religious inscriptions, the pyramid texts of the 5th to 6th dynasties, 24th, 23rd centuries BCE, already contain ascent formulas and prototypes of later guides through the afterlife. Myth is not a late flourish. It is the foundation on which more stories were built. Finally, how to read all this. Egyptian images love parallels and repetitions. That is not tedium, but a technology of reliability. Say the essential once, and it may vanish. Say it thrice, and it survives flood and regime change. We will respect this editing for eternity. Where things seem to repeat, look for a retuning another epithet, a local pride. We will neither romanticize harshness nor pretend it wasn't there. A religion responsible for the order of a great country must console and punish. We will show how this was argued in terms of measure and necessity. If you prefer stories with characters, they are here as well. Isis is not just wife and mother, but a strategist of speech, patience, and leverage. Horus is not merely a heroic son, but a ruler who must win more than one trial and duel. Seth is not a cartoon villain, but an inconvenient, necessary force. Without him, the army weakens and borders fray. Thoth is not only a god of scholars, but a clerk magician who turns memory into an instrument. Even Ra, seemingly the most sovereign, depends each night on a well-drilled crew. Egyptian gods are roles in a large play where sliding to extremes lets everyone down. Why does this still matter? Because Egypt found a way to join the eternal with the everyday. It gave form to a dream, life after death, and turned it into discipline. Don't cheat the measure. Repair the dike on time. Support the temple. Remember names. It made religion not an escape from labor, but a way to understand labor. When you bake bread, you help reassemble Osiris. When you tell the truth, you help Mot outweigh the Pan. When you clear a canal, you open a passage for Ra's barque. That is the charm of this grounded metaphysics. We are ready. In hand are 5 keys. Before us, a map of temples and festivals. Underfoot, land stitched with canals and tombs. In the next chapter, we will unfold the first time in its versions. How one and the same task, explain why there is anything at all, is solved through a mound surfacing from water, a creative speech act, or a harmonization of primeval qualities. For now, remember a simple reading formula: Ma'at Antoinart rhythm, plus measure. plus memory. Myth, instructions for the rhythm. The temple, its metronome. The pharaoh, the conductor. But the music exists only when everyone plays. Vuiskazale, 2. How the world began. Egypt's creation. Stories? Egyptians prized precision in big matters. If the world holds together, then at some point it stood up on its feet. If the sun rises each morning, someone clears its way. If the Nile arrives on time, there must be rules by which water swells and then yields the banks. Hence not one, but several beginnings. At first glance, the versions look like rivals. In practice, they interlock like different patterns, woven into the same cloth. Heliopolis tells of the first mound heaving up from water. Memphis of the power of thought and speech. Hermopolis of primordial qualities before any shape. Thebes of a hidden force, merging with the solar one. Elsewhere, local accents add their notes. Khnum the potter shapes beings on his wheel. Nith conceives things before they appear. The eye of Ra runs off and must be coaxed back, so the world's energy is refreshed. Keep one principle in view. Egyptian religion explains order through repeatable actions, and each first time becomes understandable, even necessary. Each starts the world in its own way. Together, they give a manual for keeping it in working order. Heliopolis offers the most visible picture. First there is water. None. Not sea or river, but boundless, nameless depth where nothing is yet set apart. From it, a primordial mound emerges, like silt rising as the Nile's flood withdraws. Atop it stands Adam, often identified with Ra, self-begotten. Adam engenders Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture. They in turn bring forth Geb and Nut, earth and sky, and these finally, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, the Ennead. This is less a genealogy than a work plan. Shu pushes apart Geb and Nut to make a life space. Geb gives solidity. Nut hides the sun at night and births it at dawn. Osiris explains how the dying returns to life. Isis tends speech, name, and care. Seth patrols borders and dangerous zones. Nephthys escorts transitions. In school, this looks like family tree of the gods. In a temple, it reads as a distribution of duties. If life is not to collapse back into formlessness, someone must daily hold the gap between earth and sky. Someone must guard the edges so fierce energies do not overrun the fields. Someone must receive the dead so they do not spill into the streets of the living. Heliopolis kept fine points, too. As a self-creator, Adam acts bodily and verbally. World energy does not despise the body. It works through it. From Heliopolis also comes the idea of the Ben-Ben, the first stone that memorializes the mound's rise. The obelisk, a tapering solar needle, is its descendant. It catches the ray and fixes the tie of earth and sun. Stand before any obelisk at Luxor, Karnak, or even in a Roman square, and you stand before a symbol of the world's very first emergence. Egyptians loved material markers of ideas. When light slides across the facets, you feel that order still functions. Memphis thinks otherwise. Here, Ptah, the master builder, is chief. He creates by heart, thought, and tongue, speech. Conceive it, name it, and it is. That is not airy metaphysics. It is the artisan's conviction that a thing exists when it has a function and a name. Memphis was a city of craftsmen. Chisels and plumb lines lived alongside decrees and archives. If Heliopolis teaches how land rose from water, Memphis explains how any object receives a project and a place. From here much follows. Ritual is not dance for its own sake, but the correct naming of things and actions in the necessary sequence. Law is not thunder, but a spoken order of operations. The temple is not a house of gods in a domestic sense, but a workshop of meanings where action is spoken so it matches the world's design. Hermopolis adds a layer about the materials from which a project can be built. It's Ogdoad 8 deities in 4 pairs. Names primordial qualities. Water. Nun Naunet. Infinity. He Hauhit. Darkness. Kuk Kaukit. Hiddenness. Amun Amaunet. Before forms, there were conditions. When these are balanced, light appears and stability becomes possible. Practically, this is not abstraction, but a technician's panel. If life feels too dark, bottomless, drowned, or opaque, the ritual task is to rebalance with word, music, lamplight, the order of a procession. The Ogdoad functions like sliders on a control deck to ready the hall before the performance begins. The Theban version takes another step. Here, hidden Amun merges with solar Ra as Amun-Ra invisible framework and visible light in unison. Thebes was New Kingdom capital. This is theology in the key of statecraft. Our city governs not only what shines, solar power, but what binds within, hidden cohesion. It is no accident that Theban temples, Karnak and Luxor, are oriented so that morning or evening rays penetrate to the shrine's heart on certain days. Architecture extends cosmology. If the world began by joining the hidden with the manifest, temples show that union by scheduled light. Local cosmogonies were not secondary. At Elephantine, first cataract of the Nile, people honored Khnum, the ram-headed potter, who shapes gods and humans on a wheel and sets in them the Ka. In Sais, Neith is mother of gods, who conceives the world. To the south, stories tell how Ra's eye divine energy as a lioness runs away. The world weakens. Gods lure it back. Isis sometimes compels it to listen. And order fattens again. These stories translate cosmic forces into approachable gestures. Handwork, pregnancy of thought. The hot-tempered runaway coaxed home not by clubs, but by songs. To a town's residents, this is not a cute local myth. It explains why their temple matters. Here form was given. Here an intention arose. Here strength was returned when it strayed. Why so many versions? An Egyptian would answer, the world is too large to fit one picture. Different beginnings solved different practical tasks. Heliopolis supported a solar hierarchy and justified daily rites of dawn and dusk as security at the core. Memphis buttressed craft, law, and administration. Thought and speech are tools. Hermopolis taught the weather of the soul, where to raise light or define edges so one does not drown. Thebes helped hold national cohesion during great projects and distant campaigns, insisting that invisible unity matters as much as banners in the sun. Add economics. Each major center had its temple complex, workforce, scribal school, and stores. Its cosmogony validated a piece of cosmic infrastructure and the resources to maintain it. Within every version, there are buttons to press. Consider Zep Tempi the first time. Not a birthday to remember at a feast, but a mode temples can switch on. Morning repeats the first emergence of land. The statue's first feeding starts the engine. Priestly ablutions return water from chaos to mothering medium. The temple is built as a model of the world. Perimeter for borders, pylons for the eastern and western mountains, forest-like hypostyle for the marsh of first waters, and a dark naos at the core where forces first conjoined. When a priest unties the knots on the shrine doors, he is not merely opening a room, he is re-performing creation in correct order as protection from decay. Repairs, cleanings, inventory checks. Each is also Zep Tempi. Restore first order, so later work isn't done atop rubble. Another crucial pair is Nekha and Jet 2 kinds of time. Nekha flows, like the sun's daily path. Jet abides, like Osiris's unchanging ground. Egyptians did not oppose them. They coupled them. Life requires renewal. Nekha. Water returns annually. The sun comes back. Festivals repeat and wash away fatigue. Stability requires fixity. Djet. Names, titles, laws, compacts, forever. Without Naha, the machine seizes. Without Djet, the river of days erodes its banks. Cosmogony without this pair would be unworkable. Hence the measured repetition of words. Formulas are spoken a set number of times, not because it's written, but to give both kinds of time their due. The tale of the destruction of mankind sits in the solar tradition, with Mot at its center. When humans broke order, Ra sent the lioness Sekhmet to punish. The punishment ran too hot. Gods had to dial it back. Red beer fooled the eye. Sekhmet drank, slept, and woke as Hathor, gentler and healing. This is not a story of divine trickery, but a reminder that punitive energy needs a return path, or it burns the crop with the weeds. Later ages remembered this at a festival of drunkenness, not as license, but as ritual reset, so rage doesn't calcify in people. Creation stories are never told, just because. They bind into the year's fabric. Ra's night navigation explains why certain night rites are done. The barque needs help words and flame. The first mound is a reason to say fitting words while clearing a silted canal. We repeat the first ringing of water. We are the small crew doing the gods' work in miniature. Memphis's program of thought and speech, legitimate scribal service, archives, and storerooms. Naming creates order. Hermopolis's weather station dignifies musicians, voice and rhythm as tools for thinning excess darkness. Another beginning key to Egyptian thought is the separation of sky and earth. Nut and Geb are passionately clasped. Shu pries them apart so that in between there is air, sound, and room for dialogue. In pictures, this can look like force. In politics, it reads as sobriety. If possession glues itself to power without distance, a city suffocates. If there is procedural space, council, right, court, life breathes. No treatise states it so. The images do the job. Cosmogonies are tied to natural cycles. As water recedes, a little first mound appears in every garden bed. When a plow cuts a furrow, the work follows Memphis's triad. Thought word, deed. In heat, when everything feels too infinite, shade, music, and a structured day restore hermopolitan balance. When the state embarks on grand halls, campaigns, or resettlement of artisans, Theban synthesis hidden and solar keeps the fabric from tearing. From these same premises comes syncretism. If the world's start can be viewed as surfacing land, as a speech act, or as balancing primeval qualities, then the chief god can fuse with another chief, depending on task. Amun-Ra joins visible radiance and invisible support. Ptah Sokar Osiris bridges design, underworld craftsmanship, and everlasting renewal. Khnum-Ra couples solar energy with embodied form. This is a prophylactic against brittle either-or. Egypt thinks both, and because its economy and government are networks where roles interlock. There is also a microcosm, the house where a child is born. A name is not a pet call, it is a launch. Birth is Mini-Zep Tepi, water to wash, word to anchor, amulet to guard. Keeping a tidy threshold repeats first ordering. When a mother ties the Isis knot on a wrist, she binds word to thing so protection holds. When a father checks the grain bin and rewrites the tally, that is Tah's thought and speech at home. Cosmogony meets education in the house of life. A novice scribe doesn't just clone signs. He learns to switch on processes with speech and name, and to handle the first time with care. Creation is the first course. Why the temple stands this way. Why columns mimic papyrus bundles. Why the sacred pond sits there. Why darkness in the Nios is not gloom, but protected interior that admits no unprepared rush. Creation stories also disarm fear of the unpredictable. When illness, drought, or a foreign army appears, myth doesn't promise it will sort itself out. It offers schemes. Raise the mound, clear rot, tamp foundations, open breathing space. Call the word, restate compacts, clarify duties, restore honest market measure. Balance the qualities. Cool excess rage. Bring hidden things into view. A festival is needed not for noise, but for retuning together. If punishment has come, return it to healing. Sekhmet must drink and become Hathor. Trial must become pardon after confession and repair. Even night and its midnight union belong here. In some images, Ra and Osiris join in the deepest hour. Nehe, the journey, roots itself in Jet, the enduring, and dawn becomes possible. In a house, when all lamps are out save one, a flame held on the altar keeps the everlasting alive, while the flowing passes through dark. Shutters open. A light both new and familiar enters. Order proves itself living. Finally, creation stories explain the pharaoh's role not as privilege, but service. If the beginning was separation and naming, the king must present Mot, not pose at an altar, but provide roads and dikes, fair measures and courts, storerooms and temple schedules. On reliefs, he brings a tiny figure of Mot, no trinket, but a receipt. Order has been maintained. In return, we ask for flood, health, peace. Creation thus becomes administrative ethics. Sustain the first, and the everyday stands firm. A last look shows the beginnings as a toolkit rather than a sequence. Heliopolis shows something rising from nothing and assigning roles so parts don't stick together. Memphis insists things need name and function, or they wander as shadows. Hermopolis tunes light, limits, and depth. Thebes binds invisible core to visible glory. Khnum reminds us of the hand, Neith of thought. Ra's eye of the emotional economy of power and its reversibility. When one scenario fails, say, officials forget Memphis and speak words without function. Another helps correct the course. Heliopolis lifts the mound again. Hermopolis thins too much night with song. Thebes stitches unseen seams. Cultures that rely on a single key see their lock jam. Egypt carried a key ring. Two short scenes fix the lesson. First, a solstitial morning in a temple aligned to the sun. A ray slides into the deep room, switches on the god's image. Musicians strike. A priest speaks. The city lifts the lid from a pot where order simmered all night. Second, the Niles rise. A corrugated blue line creeps higher. A boy plants a rod as a gauge. Elders note the level. The Memphis meaning is hard. Name the level right so taxes and rations are fair. The Hermopolis meaning is gentle. Don't let the heaviness of uncertainty steal anyone's hope. Sometimes, raising the first mound simply means clearing a blockage on time. In the next chapter, we board the solar barque through the night hours and the duat, the gates, the bindings of Apophis, the union with Osiris, and why dawn is a feat. By now it's clear that creation stories are not a prologue before real myths. They are the motherboard onto which Egypt plugs its daily routines. In temple lamp and spoken line, in market measure and canal repair, in the household's name and care. The world began once and keeps beginning. Egyptians devised the routines that make beginnings repeatable, and they bequeathed a language in which you can speak about them without embarrassment, as working instructions. Third, Ra and the solar cycle, the barque, Apophis, and Ma'at. If cosmogonies are instructions for how the world was started, the story of Ra is about how to keep it running every day. Egypt reads the sky like a timetable. Morning light and tasks rise. Midday measure is checked. Evening things are folded away. Night work invisible to the eye ensures the next dawn. At the center of this schedule stands the sun god. He's not one face, but several, recognized by time of day. At dawn, Khepri, the scarab pushing the solar orb. At noon, Ra-Horakhti, Ra as Horus of the two horizons, the clear presence. Toward evening, Atum, the self-begotten elder drawing the day to wise closure. One sun, varying functions. The point is simple. Every power lives by rhythm, and rhythm is the change of states within the bounds of Maat. The daytime voyage seems obvious. The barque glides from the eastern to the western horizon. Yet it has very specific machinery. At the prow sits Maat, a small figure, with the feather signaling that any step of the light must proceed, under measure and truth. Without Maat, sunlight blinds. With Maat, it warms and grows. In the crew are brawny gods and vigilant guardians, but key helpers are Sia and hue perception, knowledge and utterance, speech. They are not abstractions, but tools. First see rightly, then name rightly, and the channel opens. At times the Uraeus, the serpent eye, appears. At times, lioness protectors. At times, even Seth, whose force dangerous ashore, proves useful against hostile creatures on the water. Like practical engineers, Egyptians do not shun difficult energies if they can be harnessed to a common task. Daylight is not only joy, it is also audit. Under a clear sun, you can see whether the surveyor's measuring rope pulls true, whether market scales are honest, how the dike holds, if plaster peels on a temple facade, if the double crown carved above the gate has shifted. The sun illuminates. Maat at the prow certifies. Hence the habit of timing the king's public appearances with light. People are shown not only the ruler's face, but his claim to operate under visible scrutiny. Evening is not an end, but a switch. The sun does not fall into nothing. It enters another regime. The western horizon is a gate. Beyond lies the Duat, the there. Humans should not wander there, but a book about the world must go. Egypt left us night charts, whole atlases of the underworld, the book of Amduat, the book of gates, the book of caverns, the book of the earth. They divide the night into 12 hours, each a stretch of Ra's route with its own gate, guardians, hazards, aids, and passwords. In a museum hall, the scenes may look repetitive. To a priest, they differ like streets of a hometown. Here, you bind Apophis with ropes of words. Here, you bring fire so the waters do not stagnate. Here, Ra joins Osiris. Here, new light will be born. Apophis, Apep, is not a children's chaos serpent, but the name of what we might call system failure, a whirlpool of meaninglessness. Babble in place of speech, foul water in place of drink. Apophis is never slain once for all. He rises every night and must be tied down and cut apart, by word and deed every night. This is Egyptian sobriety. Evil is a background pressure. You garden against it as you do weeds, dust, or lazy municipal habits. Ra's barque is no yacht. It is a working boat with shifts through the dark. On Earth, the temple never truly closes. It changes mode. Inner services read the hours, tend lamps and burners, switch on the walls with voice, and flame preventive heat-ups for sacred circuits. Some rites set up images of Apophis and pierce, crush, burn them not out of cruelty, but as a sign that breakdown will not take over. Others bind and drown him in red beer, recalling Sekhmet's sobering. Text, fire, image. The three instruments of the night shift converge on a modest aim, not to let habitual darkness reclaim what daylight has so carefully ordered. At the deep midnight, Ra and Osiris meet and join. Osiris is not just Lord of the Dead, he is Jet, abiding ground. Ra is the moving Neha, the daily energy. Their union is not exotic, it is administrative wisdom. For dawn to come, Flowing time must root in the unchanging, and the unchanging must be quickened by flow. In civic terms, schedules, must rest on charter and memory, jet. And charters live only in daily practice. Osiris is the model for how yesterday and today must be married for tomorrow to arrive. Night has many helpers, deities in human, animal, and mixed forms. The great protective serpent Mahan coiling around the barque, torch-bearing goddesses, gatekeepers demanding name, sign, function. It feels like a series of passwords, and so it is. Myth joins a technique of speech. Name things properly and doors open. Speak sloppily and you lose the road. On Earth, this was instruction to scribes and judges. Words are not husks, but order. Hence those long strings of epithets, no idle rhetoric, but a fight for precision. The solar cycle locks to calendar and stars. Egypt knew deacon star groups rising in sequence, used to tell the night's hour. They were painted on star ceilings and copied into hour tables. A priest steps outside, cites a deacon, and reads a page of Amduat. The night ceases to be emptiness. It becomes a passage with markers, stars as stakes along a canal. This is navigation, not romance. Daytime rites help the barque with work, as well as words. Morning protocols purify, unseal, open, light, wash and clothe the statue. Present mat, feed belong to the first half of the day. Then distributions of bread, inventory checks, hearings and records, under a light that sees who hides and who labors. Evening closing, sealing hands the shift to the night crew. The solar barque is also the melody of civic procedures. The solar story rarely omits the eye, that energy which appears as a defender or else runs off and turns lioness. As many tales of the eye's flight as there are lessons in emotional economy, a force that, when serving, lights and warms, when wounded or overheated, deserts and destroys. It is brought back not by cudgels, but by song, coaxing, sometimes by sweet, reddened drink. This is not moral flabbiness. It is the insight that even righteous fury needs a return path to mercy. Cooling in time is part of maintaining Mat. Why dwell on night? Because night is the metaphor of unseen labor. Water moves in channels, unseen, yet it makes morning possible. Scribes reconcile accounts out of sight, yet without them, the square falls apart. A smith hones knives without drums, yet that knife will slice the festival bread. The night barque thanks and reminds us of these unsung jobs. Apophis is not only outer dark, he is inner sabotage laziness, lies, petty theft from the common good, anything that dims the dawn. Rites against him are not demon panic. They are the ethics of preventive maintenance. In the iconography of the night voyage, note the ropes and oars. Ladders, cables, stakes in divine hands mean this. Even on heaven's barque, the victory belongs not to raw magic, but to work with the hands. Memphis's thought and speech are not enough without Khnum's craft, lively hands, and practical fire, lamps and ovens. Egypt watches life closely. It refuses to turn it into fuss without action. Why is Mat central in a solar chapter? Because the sun is a temptation. It is bright, irresistible. Everything is visible. Power loves solar poses. I, like the sun, see all and do all. Egypt answers with Mat. To illuminate is not to scorch, but to straighten. If a gull shrieks over the market, do not drown it with noise, fix the measure. If a hot wind strips topsoil, do not chase glory in a campaign. Reassign strength to the broken dike. If someone forges seals, do not stage a bonfire of shame. Restore proper circulation of seals and a clean chain of custody. On a relief, the gift of Mat is a pledge that solar force won't become vanity. The night cycle reveals the opposite perilous fet, unraveling. You can see its modern masks, endless chatter pretending to be thought, sleepless irritability turning meetings into quarrels. Today's gain, devouring the year's work. Egyptian images alternate guardians and helpers. Control and care must take turns. If control dominates, the bark dries and cracks. If care becomes shapeless, it spills over, and Apophis rises of himself. Solar mathematics entered architecture. Temples were oriented so a ray would reach deep on fixed dates, New Year, keyed to Sothis, royal anniversaries, seasonal feasts. Not magic, but public test of sky-city alignment. Wide pylons are an open east, the rear court a west, the pool, energy that must be kept clean. Colonnades the papyrus thicket, through which the solar cord passes. Once a year, all could see the cosmos answer. Confidence in the city's schedule rose. Who is the barque's main enemy in practice? Not a mythic snake, out there, but desynchronization. If the market runs by one time, the temple by another, the palace by a third, and the fields by a fourth, the morning will be jagged, efforts fail to meet, audits miss deliveries, decisions arrive after the planting. Egyptian texts return stubbornly to the banal. The schedule? In the house. Who? When? What? In the city, on which day? Who is responsible? In the land, when to call to border, when to call to field. The solar barque is an image of coordinated hands. Do not miss joy. Egyptians knew that relentless solemnity kills light. Daytime Ra has songs, nighttime too. Musicians are not background. They are the lubrication of the machine. Joy is not optional. It prevents Isfet. Think of the beautiful feast of the valley. Divine barks cross to the necropolis. The living visit the dead. The city stitches two banks of the living and the justified. Not nostalgia, but a preventative. The living acknowledge their debt to those who keep the everlasting mode. The dead affirm the legitimacy of the flowing every day. After such rituals, even routine chores field marking, cleaning a watering pit, feel like parts of a single job. As for renewal, each dawn is new. Hence the Bennu phoenix perches on the obelisk's tip, the first stone that catches the ray. The phoenix is not a promise of glittering future, but a marker. Now is a beginning again. Again Khepri, the scarab, pushes the orb. A scarab is an earthy creature. Egypt does not despise the low if it works. A civilization's big forces are made of 100,000 small repeats. Each deserves respect. How did the solar myth turn into governance? First, planning by light. Work that needs inspection by day. Inventories and administrative tasks before noon's fatigue. Closing before dusk. Second, night protocols. Lamps, guards, records. Quiet, but logged. Third, shared knots festivals that gather all at one time and place. Opet, New Year, renewal rites, days when the city verifies that the boat moves. Fourth, language, public words to open and close the day. They discipline not gods, but people, reminding that anything done in light must bear the gaze. Finally, ethics. In the solar key, Mot is not moralism, but technique. Do not cheat the measure. Else light becomes glare, and the market turns to a beach. Plenty of light. No honest divisions. Do not make a festival a binge. Renewed strength is for work, not oblivion. Do not hoard without measure. The bark slows under useless trophies. Do not shout louder than the sun authority's voice. Must harmonize with the common melody, not drown it. This solar ethic is artisanal. Honest light is worth more than loudness. When a relief shows the king spearing an enemy, don't assume it's only about war. It is also about mode shift. The enemy is a site where Isfet burst through. The thrust is a tamping of the mound, so water runs in its bed again. The crowd are witnesses that the common machine did not tear. People understood the language. They did not confuse right with reality. They read right as the schematic for holding reality together. Can one manage without these complexities? On short runs, yes. On long ones, no. Egypt endured millennia, not because keepers of secrets knew the trick of endless life, but because people from priest to plowman kept the schedule of light and dark. They were not ashamed of plan and repeat. They handled anger like fire. Warm, leave it. Burning, close the damper. They rested in time, so mourning could be renewal rather than torment. They kept Mot on the prow not as a threat, but as a mark of correctness. Turn the philosophy into a homely slogan, and it sounds almost comic. To each morning its work, to each night its shift, to each light its measure. That is the charm of Egyptian sobriety. It needs no mystique to be deep. Ra sails because knowledge, speech, measure, fire, and hands accompany him. If Apophis rises, they bind him in language and deed. When morning comes, it is met not with shout, but with a swept courtyard, honest measure, an open face. Next, in Part 4, we look at the rhythm's other pole, the Osirian story. There, death is not an end, but the night shift with its own rules. How Isis restores name and body. How Horus learns to rule. How judgment bridges now and forever. We already see that Osiris and Ra are not rivals, but two beats of one breath. The daytime of measure-taking and the nighttime of depth-holding. Without the first chaos in the square, without the second emptiness in the heart. Egypt taught them to speak together. 4. Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Seth. Death, renewal, and power. In Egyptian myth, there is a story that explains not only why beings die and rise, but also why power must be lawful and limited by measure. Its figures are known even to those who have never opened the Book of the Dead. Osiris, the green-faced lord of the underworld. Isis, a mother and enchantress whose word heals. Horus, the Vulcan heir whose eye is wounded and restored. Seth, the force of desert, storm, and border, dangerous yet indispensable when properly assigned. This is not a divine family drama, but a constitution spelling out how law, mercy, punishment, and memory relate. And it legislates human practices too. Burial, judgment, inheritance, renewal of royal authority, the policing of frontiers, even how to treat an injury. The plot fits in a line. Seth kills Osiris. Isis searches for his scattered body, gathers and restores it enough to conceive Horus the heir. Then come trials and bouts between Seth and Horus over the right to rule. Horus prevails, and Osiris becomes Lord of the Dead. The world gains two supports at once. Daytime, Horus, governance, and nighttime, Osiris, enduring ground. Unrolled, the tale is not a fable, but a series of practical lessons. Osiris is not a god of death in a grim sense. He is the principle of restoration. He is often painted green, the color of sprouting stems and fresh papyrus. Legend makes him a good king. He taught people to sow, grind, bake bread. He forbade cannibalism. He set fair measures in the market. Even alive, he is a norm maker, turning a crowd into a citizenry. That is why his murder imperils not only a family, but the whole order. Seth is not pure envy or evil. He is desert force, hot wind, storm, hard edge. The same energy that guards a border can, in a day, strip the fields and topple walls if unchecked. Egyptians never demonize Seth wholesale. He is needed in war. He defends the solar barque by night. He stands for energies that need not be gentle. But in peacetime, he tends to overload the measure-turn force against foundation. The death of Osiris is the first breach of Mot here. Isis does not answer with screams, but with work. She searches, weeps. Tears in Egypt are not shame, but a contract with memory calls on Nephthys, her sister. Together, they turn shattered into recognized and reassembled. This is the core of funerary culture. The body is not refuse. Memory is not sentimentality. Burial is not a goodbye to a shell, but an engineering operation to preserve the person for judgment and a new status. From this grows mummification, not fear of death, but respect for human form as a vessel still needed. When an Egyptian buries his father, he is not playing mystic. He is helping the Osiris within that man become capable of vindication. The conception of Horus by a reassembled Osiris is no scandal, but a doctrine of continuity. The world must have an heir, lest it fragment into strongmen's enclaves. Isis is both mother and diplomat. She hides the infant from the killer, withdraws into the marshes, calls on commoners and gods, threads protective texts into the child's speech. Her magic is not trickery, but the ability to name things so they assemble in needed order. In late scenes, she even heals Ra, learning his hidden name, not as a blackmailer, but as a physician who knows that to name is to dose power correctly. Here, Egypt gives the woman a role not by candlelight, but at the lever. Isis is the operator of language and strategy. When Horus comes of age, the sessions begin. A late narrative makes it almost comic. Gods meet in the great court, hear both sides, weigh witnesses. Uncles and aunts intervene. Ra hesitates. Thoth records. Nith gives crisp counsel. Seth, of course, appeals to strength. Let the mightier rule. Horus appeals to law. I am the son of the lawful king. From time to time, the dispute moves from court to field duels. Egyptians do not pretend that law cancels force. They force them to meet under rules all can read. The episode of restoring the eye of Horus is marked by the Wedjot amulet. Horus's eye symbol of wholeness is struck. Thoth heals and returns, its symbol of justice restored. There is even an engineering side. The Wedjot is also a set of fractional measures for dividing bread and beer, a corner ruler by which rations were reckoned. Symbolism and bookkeeping share a line. The eye becomes a measure in law and economy alike. To return the eye is to restore the capacity to see measure. To lose the eye is a failure. Rage, haste, color blindness in politics. Thoth, the god of writing and account, acts as surgeon, clerk, and judge at once. He mends, records, and balances. His role teaches a simple truth. Justice is not only a verdict, but a sum that must add up. Fairness is not a pretty word, but the proper circulation of bread and people. Court scenes end in a verdict for Horus. Yet Seth is not killed to the last. He is assigned. In some versions he takes the northern deserts and foreign borders, where his strength is apt. In others, he becomes a bodyguard of Ra's barque at night, when harshness does more good than harm. This is pure political thought. You do not delete dangerous energies. You employ them. The problem is not Seth as such, but where and how he acts. A good state is not where everyone is nice, but where force is given corridors. After Horus's victory, power gains a legitimate shape. The pharaoh is living Horus. Osiris's legacy holds. The king is not only head of army and courts, but guarantor of time's proper passage. His titulary is a firmware of roles. NSW Bitwise, king of Upper and Lower Egypt Unifier, son of Ra, solar responsibility. The two ladies, under Nekhbet and Wadjet, vulture and cobra of the two lands. Golden Horus, victory over Seth, a throne name in a cartouche, protected contour, and a personal name. This is not pomp for pomp's sake. Each title is a contract clause. When the king presents a tiny figure of Maat on reliefs, he is effectively filing a report. We keep measure. In return, we ask for flood, health, and peace. The Osiris-Horus-Seth cycle also governs the economy of death. Osiris becomes lord of the Duat, not as an executioner, but as one who knows how to rise rightly. In his court, no one slips through on connections. Before Anubis and Thoth, on the scales lie heart and the feather of Maat. If the heart is heavy, Amit devours it. If light, the soul becomes an ak-effective, luminous, and enters the field of reeds, where work is joy and bread carries no bitterness of fraud. The link to this world is explicit. Do not cheat measure, do not steal offerings, do not dam water for yourself, do not withhold milk, do not violate a workshop's rule. Then your heart will be light. Funerary texts are not ways to bypass judgment with passwords, but navigation for those who have practiced Maat all along. A domestic copy of the grand story is an ordinary person's funeral. Lament, washing, wrapping, amulets. None of it is superstition. Each amulet has a function. The wedjat for integrity and sight. A heart scarab so the heart does not testify against its owner wrongly and remembers what should be remembered. The Jed pillar. Osiris's spine, so the person stands firm. The Isis knot for durable protection. The child Horus on crocodiles for control over harmful creatures. Each amulet bears text, not for souvenir buyers, but for the Duat's gatekeepers. Present it, and you are recognized by roll. Funerary texts evolve. The earliest, the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, are a royal privilege, formulas for ascent to the stars, turning into an effective spirit, speaking with lords of the sky. Then the coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom, accessible to nobles and the well-off, more earthy, with scenes tied to home and property. Finally, the papyrus book of the dead of the New Kingdom, personal scrolls with miniatures, placed in the tomb with the deceased. There you find the negative confession, the coming forth by day, and descriptions of Aru, the field of reeds, where the justified continues labor plowing, reaping, barely breaking a sweat, because here work is the joy of meaningful action. There also appear ushabti, shabti, small substitute figurines inscribed to work for the deceased if summoned for state labor in the Duat. This is not the dead shirking. It is the institutionalization of work. You labored in life, now your delegates labor for you, while you repay the gods in the currency of a truthful heart rather than calluses. The Duat is full of water and fire. Lakes of fire are not hell for all, but a purifying field, for those who must pass, a glow so defilement flakes off. Waters, now calm, now choppy, require a ferryman. Sometimes the deceased addresses the ferryman with a request to cross. He asks for the boat's name, the pole's name, the ford's name tests of functional knowledge. The far bank is no blank paradise, but a continuation of arable earth, only freed from nonsense. Bridges, sluices, dikes, images from the Nile continue to operate in the beyond. To tell safe from forbidden crossings is the extension of earthly craft. Among the night hours, some are fierce decapitations, cuttings, executioners with blades, demons with knives. To modernize this jars. To an Egyptian, this is not a cult of cruelty, but things called by their names. If there is evil, dissect it. If there is lying, remove its tongue. If there is a thief who tampered with seals and measures, deprive his hands ritually the right to open vessels. The Duat is a legal world where each receives according to deeds, and since deeds are heart, word, name, punishments are the loss of misused functions: speech, sight, locomotion. The judgment of Osiris is central, but not the only court. In the Book of Gates, each realm of night has its audience. The station of fire burns for cleansing. The sandy place tests endurance. The heavenly Nile tests handling of water. The land of the blessed tests readiness to work without envy. Roles recur. Anubis is not grim, but master technician of transition binding, opening, closing, guarding. Thoth is writing and account. He records what is, not what pleases. Hathor is joy, feasting, restoration of strength. Sekhmet is punitive heat that must turn clinical, or the city burns. Ninth is wise counsel. Give Horus the throne by right. Mot is the unexcited plumb line. The feather is not pressed. It simply lies as a true measure lies. Even fierce Ammit is not a monster, but protection, so that lying hearts no longer walk among the living and scramble their measure. Translate metaphysics into architecture. An Egyptian tomb is not a bone store, but a device that helps a person be recognized, speak, eat, and return when called. False doors are portals for the Ka. Offering tables are not furniture, but interfaces for the energy of food. Hunting and banquet scenes are not wishful dreams, but visual formulas that activate under the living's voice. Corridors of royal tombs do not just slope down. Their walls unfurl the night books, slides of the night that work when seen by gods and read by priests. Some chapels bear star ceilings, golden stars on deep blue, not for ornament, but so the room has a heaven mode for the Ba to orient by. Form obeys the task of orientation and recognition. The ethics of the Duat is straight and strict. Who is afraid there? The one who lived like a shedding eel, dodged truth, refused signatures, ducked responsibility, annexed common goods, ignored common works, fouled the measure. That soul is uneasy, because the Duat is a territory of function. There one must know one's name, acknowledge others, speak to the point, be ready to work without whining, endure strict truth. Who rejoices there? Anyone who behaved as a citizen, signed what was his, paid debts, repaired dikes on time, kept silence when there was nothing to say, spoke when needed, protected the weak not for applause, but because otherwise the common order collapses. For such people, the feather meets the heart with ease. The Duat binds to festivals of the living. Once a year, at the beautiful feast of the valley, Thebes ferried the gods' barques across the Nile to the necropolis to visit the ancestors. Not dull mourning, but stitching of two banks. The living acknowledge the labor of the dead recognize the legality of the living's work. The city gets a reset of meaning. The same logic governs visits to tombs on commemorative days. Names are read. Food left. Addresses for the Kai are kept current. Without this meeting, the Duat detaches into legend. With it, it remains the reverse of the same orchestra, where Ra and Osiris negotiate nightly. A fair question. Could the wicked pass by passwords? Egypt answers hard. No. Password without deed is wind. Hence texts do not sell salvation. They explain rules of recognition. The gods care not for chatter, but for the match of words and acts. Thus in the hall, Thoth does not draw the scale. He writes what he sees. Anubis does not help his own. He does precise work. Mot does not sympathize. She measures. 42 assessors are not buddies, but representatives of domains where you could offend. Water, market measure, temple store, boundary, family zones of responsibility. The negative confession reads like a shop foreman's round. No trash here. Repaired on time here. Leave properly earned here. Report submitted here. oddly comforting. In Egypt, eternity is more reliable than faith in luck. A word more on Heka, not magic in a theatrical sense, but the engineering of speech. Some formulas throw a rope to Ra against Apophis. Others grant power over stinging things. I know the name of your venom, the name of the herb that neutralizes it, the name of the water that washes it away. Not hobby sorcery, but safety technique. Priests are not wizards, but operators of security and meaning. They hold the night like a duty engineer holds a station. Their job is to ensure dawn happens, and dawn means both light on the temple facade and honest weight in the market. Can the duat be cheated, a back corridor cut for our own? Egyptians sometimes paint harsh scenes of offense, the rich who hoarded in life while the poor starved, then tried to buy salvific scrolls and tombs. The system's reply is quiet and stern. Text without deed is smoke. Inscription without memory is dust. A tomb without a name, or with a name scraped off, is a visible symbol. A forgotten person is food for Isfet, that is, oblivion. Eternity is a maintained connection. You cannot seal it in stone without living people. Hence the importance of the House of Life. Not just a scriptorium, but an archive, so that names do not fall out of the net. Eternity is institutional. Do not overlook women's labor in the duat. The mourners are not theatrical. Their lament extracts a name from darkness. When Isis and Nephthys weep, they do not fall apart. They activate a direct line. Public grief is the acknowledgement of value. Memory is a passport. In houses, courtyards, and at false doors, women hold the sacred thread that calls the name back to the world. In this sense, Egyptian magic is collective. It is not lodged in the priest. It is distributed. Scribes write, builders raise, women lament, children memorize and read, and eternity holds. Stars in the duat are not mere backdrop. Egyptians knew deacon star groups used to count night hours. On tomb ceilings are hour charts, which stars, where and when. Combine them with the Book of Amduat, and you have dual navigation. Gods with their route, the dead with their hourly maps, priests with their markers for readings. Again, the theme is synchronization. Sky, temple, city, and field must play the same song. If desynchronization sets in, Isfet raises its head. Someone fails to open a sluice. Someone fails to close. Someone misses the bottleneck. Why insist on ritual? Because ritual is the handover protocol between days, worlds, and people. In the duat, without protocol, promises crumble. Try to run a city without a timetable. That is the hell of Isfet, not freedom. Egyptian afterlife bureaucracy is humane. It gives everyone an intelligible way to be recognized and pass. A poor man with modest offerings and a grandee with painted halls, both must name the names and present the heart. As metaphysics translates into modern feeling, the duat is the endgame of ethics. You cannot add anything to yourself there except what you have already done. You can clarify a word, tie the right knot, present an amulet, but these mechanisms work only because, in life, a person built, from dike to document. Egyptian wisdom lacks cynicism. It does not await blanket forgiveness. It offers common preparation. At the exit stand, the fields of reeds, Aru, space of the vindicated. Everything is familiar. Canals, fields, trees, wind, boats. There is no enervating idleness and no borrowed pain. Labor is light and generous. Why? Because paradise for an Egyptian is not blinding glory or tiresome rest. It is measured work, finally free of the sabotage of bad faith. Osiris guarantees that Djet, everlastingness, holds the form of beautiful everyday life. Thus, Aru admits not simply the good, but the fit, those who learn to do things well. End with a handful of small practices that clarify the large system. Set water on a tomb threshold, not a trifle. The Bea loves fresh water and a sign of attention. Read the name, not a trinket. The Ka eats through words. Sweep grit from the necropolis path, not for the guard, but for yourself. The road there and back must be clean, in letter and sense. To name your dead, this is father, this is mother, is to keep them wired into the duat. To let the wire fall is to hand them to Amit, that is, to forgetting. The Egyptian map of the duat frightens with detail only at first, then its sobriety shines. Fear loses power when there is a protocol. If afraid, hold the name, hold the word, hold the heart. Brutality loses glamour when its place is fixed. The end of rage is punishment, and for the punisher, the return path to Hathor. Lying loses charm when the entire operation runs on measured words, in which confusion is impossible. And at last, death ceases to be alien. It becomes a shift. For a person used to handing over a shift properly, the duat makes sense. Next, we rise from the night logistics to the day machine of the temple city. Who stands at the gates? Who at the storerooms? Who holds the calendar? How the pharaoh presents Maat, not with slogans, but with work plans and judgment. How the house of life keeps texts and people in one rhythm. But it is already clear that the other world is not a parallel fable. It is the reverse side of everyday Egypt. It uses the same tools: word, measure, name, labor, water, fire, boat, knot, seal. The same roles: judge, scribe, embalmer, ferryman, singer, guard. The same goal: dawn. Viskazale 5a. Duat and the judgment of the dead. The path to vindication. An Egyptian did not fear death as a void, he feared it as disorder. Death is not a switch, but a transfer to another section of the route with its own schedule, signage, and document checks. That section is the duata, layered there, at once underworld, the starry interior of the sky, and a navigational map of trials. Nothing in it is pointless. Every creature is a function, every threshold a test, every terror an exam in keeping measure. To pass the duat, you need three things: a name, identity anchored in memory and inscriptions; the right word, Heka efficacious speech; and a worthy heart, ethics in life. If one leg of the tripod is weak, the gate will not swing open. This is why an Egyptian prepares for relocation all his life. He accrues a good name, learns to speak rightly, and lives so the heart does not grow heavy. Begin with the map. In New Kingdom royal tombs, the walls carry atlases of the duat, the book of Amduat, that which is in the duat, the book of gates, the book of caverns, the book of the earth. They divide night into 12 hours, each a stretch of Ra's route. What fits a god fits a person, not because he rides the same barque, but because his path is sewn to this nocturnal schedule. Each hour has its gates, lakes, sand plats, fields, guardians with names and demands. The captioning is not decoration but prompts and passwords. Say this, show that sign, name the guardian, declare you are clean of this. Not bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake, but a way to translate morality into ritual language. For a people who worship word and measure, it could hardly be otherwise. Gates set the rhythm. The Book of Gates shows 12 tall doors, each opening to a court staffed by divine crews. At the door stand wardens, serpents, executioners, and well-wishers. They ask your name, and in Egypt, a name is not a label, but a dossier essence stapled to deed and to writing. Hence the obsession with inscriptions. A name in the cartouche on a sarcophagus, on a statue, on a stela insurance against forgetting. Oblivion is not romantic darkness, it is disintegration. A thing without a name is easily eaten by Eisfet. Wardens can be stern, but not malicious. Their task is to sift out the unprepared. A heart heavy with lies and theft will not pass, however well the texts are memorized. This is why alongside passwords stands the negative confession affirmations spoken before 42 assessors. I have not cheated in measure. I have not stolen from the god. I have not withheld milk from a child. I have not stopped water from flowing. I have not listened to evil speech. These points are not rhetoric. They are the notebook of civic housekeeping and conscience. Egyptians did not live by memorize formulas. Maybe it'll work. They lived so the formulas would be true. The Duat's most famous scene is the weighing of the heart. In the Hall of Truth, Ma'at, Anubis, jackal-headed lord of transition and embalming, sets the deceased's heart on one pawn, on the other, the feather of Ma'at, the true measure. Thoth, ibis-headed god of writing and account, records the result. Nearby waits Amit, the devourer crocodile head, lion forequarters, hippo hindquarters, an antiform assembled from strong beasts. If the heart tips heavy, she consumes it. The weighing is not a metaphysical riddle. It is a transfer of market justice into eternity. If you tilted scales for a lifetime, why should your scale suddenly read honest now? Egypt is blunt. Ritual amplifies truth. It does not replace it. How to prepare for the weighing. First, by life. The prohibitions of the negative confession are everyday discipline. Don't block the canal downstream. Don't measure bread with a crooked cup. Don't shove the weak aside. Don't invade a neighbor's boundary. Don't keep offerings for yourself. Don't turn a festival into a binge. These are direct ways to lighten the heart. Second, by word. Egyptian Heka is the engineering of speech, the chancery's exact formula, the judge's phrasing, the engineer's handover. Book of the Dead spells are not loopholes, but instructions to locks, gates, and keepers. The right word opens because it matches function. I know your name means I recognize your role. You can recognize mine. Third, by body. The mummy is not fetish, but engineering. Preserve the body so the Ka, vital share, and Ba, mobile soul, have an address. Without address, they are wandering lights. With one, they can participate. These parts matter. The Ka life share needs sustenance, hence the offering formula on stele. An offering which the king gives to the Ka of En, bread, beer, oxen, fowl. The words don't steal from gods. They invite kin and cult to renew remembrance-bringing, reading the name, keeping the address alive. The Ba human-headed bird lets a person be in many places, to go out, see, return. It loves order, landmarks, recognizable gates. The Ak, effective, luminous, is the status one attains if vindicated, able to act among the gods. For all this, the dead need a house of eternity. A tomb designed as a machine of repetition. Scenes of food and hunt aren't wishes, but provision formulas. Texts are not ornament, but function. The funerary protocol is finely tuned. Opening of the mouth reactivates functions. The Sem priest touches mouth and eyes with odds and wands. Now the deceased can speak, see, eat. Canopic jars 4 vessels for viscera under the care of Horus's sons, Imseti, Hapi, Duamutef, Kebesenuef, and guardian goddesses are no whim, but a new distribution of organs under protection. Each jar aligns with a cardinal point and an organ geography and physiology in resonance. Amulets are not lucky charms, but assembly parts. The wedjot for wholeness and sight. The heart scarab to keep the heart from testifying out of turn and to fix what must be remembered. the Jed pillar Osiris's spine for stability, the Isis knot for durable shelter, the child Horus on crocodiles to control harm. Each bears text not for tourists, but for duat gatekeepers. Present it, and you are recognized by function. Funerary literature evolves. The Old Kingdom's pyramid texts, a royal privilege, give ascent formulas to the stars and transformations into Ak power. The Middle Kingdom's coffin texts open access to elites and prospering townsfolk, more earthly, tied to house and property. The New Kingdom standard is the papyrus Book of the Dead, with vignettes placed inside the tomb. There you meet the negative confession, coming forth by day, and the field of reeds, Aru, where the vindicated continue work plowing and reaping without strain, because here labor is the joy of meaningful action. There also appear Ushabti, Shabti, small substitute figures inscribed to answer when the state calls the dead to public works in the duat. Not laziness, but institutionalization. You labored in life. Now your delegates labor for you, while you repay the gods with a truthful heart. The duat is full of water and fire. Lakes of fire are not universal torment, but purifying fields where dross is burned off. Waters placid or rough demand a ferryman. He asks for the boat's name, the pole's name, the ford's name. Tests of functional literacy. The far bank is no blank paradise, but a continuation of arable earth, cleansed of nonsense. Bridges, sluices, dikes. Nile images continue to operate beyond. Reading where it is safe and where the forbidden ford lies is an extension of earthly craft. Some night hours shock with their severity beheadings, cuttings, demons with blades. To modern taste, this feels harsh. For Egyptians, it was calling things by their names. If there is evil, dismember it. If there is lying, take its tongue. If someone tampered with seals and measures, remove his hands ritually, the right to open vessels. The duat is a legal realm in which recompense follows function. Because deeds consist of heart, word, name, penalties are loss of the very functions that were abused: speech, sight, motion. The judgment of Osiris dominates but is not alone. In the Book of Gates, each night realm has its court. A station of fire burns to purify. A sandy place tests endurance. A heavenly Nile tests watercraft. A land of the blessed tests willingness to work without envy. Roles repeat. Anubis is not grim, but a master of transition, a technician who knows how to bind, open, close, guard. Thoth is writing an account. He records what is, not what flatters. Hathor is delight music, and rest that mends strength. Sekhmet is punitive heat that must pivot to medicine, or it will consume the city. Ninth gives strategic counsel, give Horus the throne by right. Mot is the calm plumb line. The feather is not pressed. It simply lies, as true measure lies. Even dread emit is not a monster, but protection, to keep lying hearts from walking among the living in deranging measure. Translate metaphysics to architecture. An Egyptian tomb is not a bone vault, but a device that helps a person be recognized, speak, eat, return when called. False doors are the cause in and out. Offering tables are not furniture, but interfaces for the energy of food. Hunting and banquet scenes are visual formulas that activate when spoken over by the living. Royal tomb corridors do not only slope downward, their walls unfurl the night books, slides that work when seen by gods and read by priests. Some chapels carry star ceilings, gold on deep blue, not for decoration, but to give the room a sky mode by which the Bia can orient. All form serves orientation and recognition. The ethics of the duat is blunt and clean. Who dreads it? The one who lived like a shedding eel, dodged truth, refused signatures, dodged responsibilities, appropriated common goods, ignored public works, scuffled with measure. Such a soul is unwell there, because the duat is a territory of function. There one must know one's name, acknowledge others, speak to the point, be ready to work without whining, endure strict truth. Who delights there? The Grajdan and the citizen, who signed what was his, paid debts, repaired dikes on time, kept silence when there was nothing to say, spoke when needed, protected the weak not for applause, but because otherwise order collapses. For such people, the feather meets the heart easily. The duat is stitched to the festivals of the living. Once a year, at the beautiful feast of the valley, Thebes ferried divine barques across the Nile to the necropolis, visiting ancestors. Not dreary mourning, but sewing together two banks. The living acknowledge the labor of the dead affirm the legitimacy of the living's work. The city receives a reset of meaning. Likewise, families visit tombs on remembrance days. Names are read, food left, addresses for the ka kept current. Without these meetings, the duat detaches into legend. With them, it remains the reverse side of the same orchestra in which Ra and Osiris negotiate nightly. Could the wicked pass on passwords? Egypt answers hard. No. A password without deed is wind. Hence, the texts do not sell salvation. They explain rules of recognition. The gods care not for chatter, but for the match of words and acts. In the hall, Thoth does not draw the scales. He writes what he sees. Anubis does not help his own. He does precise work. Maat does not sympathize. She measures. The 42 assessors are not friends, but representatives of domains where one might offend. Water, market measure, temple store, boundary, family zones of responsibility. The negative confession reads like a foreman's round. No trash here, repairs on time, leave properly earned, report submitted. Odd, but comforting. In Egypt, eternity is more reliable than luck. A word on Hika. It is not stage magic, but speech engineering. Some formulas throw a rope to Ra against Apophis. Others grant power over stinging things. I know the name of your venom, the name of the herb that neutralizes it, the name of the water that washes it away. Not hobby sorcery, but safety protocol. Priests are not wizards. They are operators of security and meaning. They hold the night like a duty engineer holds a plant. Their job is to ensure dawn happens, both as light on the temple facade and as honest weight in the market. Can the duat be cheated, a back corridor cut for favorites? Egyptian images sometimes scold offenses. The rich who hoarded while the poor starved, then tried to buy ornate scrolls and tombs. The system's answer is quiet and stern. Text without deed is smoke. Inscription without memory is dust. A tomb without a name, or with a name scraped away, is a clear symbol. A forgotten person is food for Isfet, that is, forgetting. Eternity is a maintained connection. Stone cannot secure it without living people. Hence the House of Life mattered, not just a scriptorium, but an archive keeping names in the net. Eternity is institutional. Do not overlook women's labor in this passage. The lamenters are not theatrical. Their cry extracts a name from darkness. When Isis and Nephthys weep, they do not fall apart. They activate a line. Public grief recognizes value. Memory is a passport. In houses, courtyards, and at false doors, women hold the sacred thread that calls the name back. Egyptian magic is collective. Scribes write, builders raise, women lament, children memorize and recite, and eternity holds. Stars in the duat are not backdrop. Egyptians tracked deacons, star groups used to count night hours. Tomb ceilings carry hour charts, which stars where, when. Combined with Amduat, these make dual navigation, gods with their route, the dead with their hour maps, priests with their markers for readings. Again, the theme is synchronization. Sky, temple, city, and field must keep time. If desynchronization creeps in, Ifet lifts its head. Someone fails to open the sluice. Someone fails to close. Someone misses the narrow pass. Why insist on ritual? Because ritual is the handover protocol between days, worlds, people. Without protocol, promises crumble. Try running a city without a timetable. That is Isfet, not freedom. Egyptian afterlife, bureaucracy, is humane. It gives everyone an intelligible way to be recognized and to pass. A poor man with modest offerings and a grandee with painted halls both must name names and present a heart. Translated into modern feeling, the duat is the endgame of ethics. You cannot add anything there except what you have already done. You can clarify a word, tie the right knot, present an amulet, but these mechanisms work only because in life, a person built from dike to document. Egyptian wisdom is uncynical. It does not expect blanket pardons. It proposes common preparation. At the exit lies the field of reeds, Aru, the space of the vindicated. Everything is familiar. Canals, fields, trees, wind, boats. There is no numbing idleness and no borrowed pain. Labor is light and generous. Why? Because paradise for an Egyptian is not blinding glory or wearying rest. It is measured work, finally free of sabotage by bad faith. Osiris guarantees that jet everlastingness holds the shape of beautiful everyday life. Hence, admission is not for the nice, but for the fit, those who learned to do things well. A handful of small practices anchor the whole. Set water on a tomb threshold, not trivial. The Bea loves fresh water and a sign of attention. Read the name, not a trinket. The Ka eats through words. Sweep grit from the necropolis path, not for the guard, but for yourself. The road there and back must be clean, in letter and in spirit. Call your dead by name. This is father, this is mother. And keep them wired into the duat. Let the wire fall, and you hand them to omit to forgetting. The map of the duat intimidates only at first. Then its sobriety shines. Fear loses power when there is a protocol. If afraid, hold the name, the word, the heart. Brutality loses glamour when its place is fixed. The end of rage is punishment, and for the punisher, the return path to Hathor. Lies lose charm when the whole operation runs on measured words in which confusion is impossible. Finally, death stops being alien. It becomes a shift. For someone used to handing over a shift properly, the duat makes sense. Next, we will come up from night logistics to the daylight machine of the temple city. Who mans the gates, who the storerooms, who keeps the calendar. How the pharaoh presents Maat, not with slogans, but with work plans and judgment. How the house of life keeps texts and people in one rhythm. By now it is clear that the other world is not a parallel fable, but the reverse of everyday Egypt. It uses the same tools: word, measure, name, labor, water, fire, boat, knot, seal, the same roles: judge, scribe, embalmer, ferryman, singer, guard, and the same goal: dawn. 6. Pharaoh, the temple, and the economy of the sacred. When Egyptians said the country stands, they meant more than walls and an army. Stands meant breathing in one rhythm. Water comes and goes. Accounts balance. The court functions. The temple keeps time. And the king shows that his strength answers to measure rather than whim. This chapter lays out how myth became an administrative machine, and how the sacred became an economy, without which fields, dikes, and scribal schools do not run. The chief actors are the pharaoh as bearer of Maat, The temple is a miniature cosmos, priests and scribes as operators of the schedule, and the townsfolk and villages whose labor feeds the whole system. In Egyptian imagination, the pharaoh is not a god-man in a modern sense, but an office that couples two kinds of time, the flowing and the everlasting. His titulary is not ornament, but job description. Nasubaiti reminds him of the two lands, upper and lower, and the duty to keep them in concord. Son of Ra is a pledge to act in light and under Mot, not in the twilight of caprice. Golden Horus is an oath that Seth will be kept to corridors fit for force and not loosed upon the square. Every public gesture of the king is a contractual clause. On reliefs, he offers the gods a tiny figure of Motnot, a gift, but a report and a requisition for cosmic resources. Rain, flood, health. The meaning is plain. We uphold order, grant the fruits that confirm it. Where is this contract performed? In the temple. An Egyptian temple is not a club of priests or a museum of antiquities. It is a device that reproduces the world. Pylons are the eastern and western mountains. Peristyle courts are the open spaces where light and procession meet. Hypostyle halls are the forest of the first waters through which a shaft of light passes to the heart. The naos is a small dark room where the cult statue, body of presence, receives water, food, music, and word. The compound has a sacred lake for ablutions and water memory, workshops for linen, oil, incense, statuary, and amulets, granaries for grain and beer, and the house of life school of scribes, library, infirmary, and ritual tech support. A temple is a full-cycle enterprise. It manufactures, stores, keeps time, judges measure, and welds city to Nile and sky. The daily schedule is engineering poetry. At dawn, priests wash in the lake, don linen clean, not for looks, but so the body brings no noise into the work break seals, open doors, awake the image with word and smoke, wash, feed, dress it, present Mot. Then come hymns, music, circles of incense, not for sentiment, but as precise activations in the cosmos's electrical diagram. Daytime brings petitioners, oath-taking, adjudication, intake, and issuance of stores. By evening, the sequence reverses. Close, seal, hand over to the night shift, which also works. Lamps, the reading of night hours, guard. Festivals are knots in the year. The Opet festival carries a moon between Karnak and Luxor. The city witnesses the union of heart and body, and the pharaoh's force is renewed. The beautiful feast of the valley ferries the barques to the necropolis. The living meet the justified, and two banks are stitched together. Ritual is not decor. It is the handover protocol among gods, city, and field. Who makes this machine possible? Priests and scribes, the Hemu Netcher, servants of the god, and keepers of words. The hierarchy is simple and functional. There are Wab priests of ritual purity, senior officiants, timekeepers of the temple schedule, masters of seals and keys. Scribes are the connective tissue. They measure rope, plumb line, cord grid, record inflows and outflows, grain, oil, meat, linen, keep worker lists, and mark rations given out. Their literacy is not classical culture, but a tool. The ideal inscription is the one through which every grain falls into the right bin, and each hand receives its due. The system relies not on charisma, but repeatability. If the account balances today, dawn will happen tomorrow. Temple economy is not by product, it is the regulator. Fields, herds, fisheries, groves are assigned to temples and distributed for festivals and needs. The temple is the largest employer. Priests, singers, scribes, brewers, weavers, masons, potters, carpenters. Payment is in kind, bread, beer, oil, linen, sometimes meat. Rations are not charity but factory wages. In the artisan village of Deir el-Medina, which built royal tombs, workers received bread and beer rations. Ostraca show how they complained when rations were late, and organized a strike under Ramesses III, among the earliest recorded in history. The lesson is clear. The economy of the sacred is not missed. It is numbers the townspeople understood and could defend. Accounting is everywhere. Granaries use beehive silos, numbered and sealed. Storerooms hold bundles of linen tagged. Leather tally straps track rations. Ceramic sherds carry quick delivery notes. A scribe sits, wets his brush, draws signs, and deals with the man at the gate. If you deliver, you receive a receipt. If you ask, you get according to norm. Measure breeds trust, and trust averts revolt. Hence the regular checking of weights and measures. Weights bear images of goddesses of measure. Bowls carry the Wedjot sign. This is not fetishizing objects, but embedding Maat in utensils. A generous system cannot stand on crooked scales. You cannot understand temple economy without water. The Nile is artery and metronome. The flood brings silt, spreads a new primordial mound across the fields. The drop launches sowing, then harvest. Near some sanctuaries stood nilometers, stepped shafts or staircases with marks of the level by which officials set taxes and forecast work volumes. No one hides dependence. If the level is high, the tax is fuller, but stores are easier to fill. If low, economy and requests to the gods are in order, not only with ritual, but with ditch cleaning and dike repair. Processions with torches are not enough. Shovels must appear. The temple's work lists name not only who sings, but also who digs. The sacred without a ditch digger is poetry without bricks. Heika in temple householding means the skill of naming things and thereby putting them in place. A scribe who names the contents of a storeroom and seals it performs the same act Memphis theology ascribes to Ptah. Thought-speech. Being. A priest who speaks a formula before ration distribution does not cast a spell. He legitimizes economy. Allocation becomes public and auditable. Conversely, quiet warehouse magic. Swapping tags, substituting a measure, is not a prank, but a crime against Maat. Hence the attention to seals and knots. The Isis knot worn at the neck is not trinket, but reminder. Bonds must hold also in the storeroom. The movement of stone is a chapter in itself. Columns, obelisks, blocks for halls, hundreds of people, crews, deadlines, and provisioning. An obelisk is not merely a solar needle. It is the balance of a budget. Bringing it from the quarry, setting it on a base, aligning it to the sun. This is a state-scale operation whose success gauges the government's capacity to deliver Maat. When you read the base for the kings' and gods' names, you are also reading the names of engineers and dock crews without signature. The whole country sees we can coordinate thousands of hands. The obelisks of Luxor or Karnak are diplomas, not only monuments. Festivals make the invisible visible. During Opet, the city becomes a theater of management, removing the statues, loading them onto barques, moving along the river or processional way, meeting, overnighting, returning. Each step is a line on a checklist. Tradition requires that all be in order, not from pedantry, but so people, watching the gods, learn the schedule. Children see fathers carry the pole, mothers prepare linen and bread, a scribe seriously ticking boxes, and understand. In this country, the divine is the ability to be on time. The temple calendar is not just a scroll in a shrine. It becomes a poster in the city's mind. What happens when and who is responsible? A special faculty is the house of life, Perank. Here scribes are trained, texts are copied, the sick are treated, archives are sewn and kept. Here lie the night maps and books of words. Here, city memory is stored. A teacher shows a pupil a sign, the pupil repeats. A table of measures lies nearby, and a lexicon of divine epithets, not for beauty, but so formula matches function. Sometimes oracles are taken here, asking the god through priests, bearing the statue on a litter and watching it incline, yes, no. This is not superstition, but an admission that a large machine needs places where a request, upwards, makes visible the doubts and hopes of those below. Justice in the temple city grows from the same soil. A bench, a scribe, a rod with marks, and before them, disputes of boundary, water, debts, marriage. Egyptians do not hide courts in the palace because justice lives in daylight. Scenes of giving mot and the afterlife weighing are mirrored in city life. Judges examine negative confessions in miniature. I did not short measure. I did not lie. I did not steal from the god. I did not hold up water. Confession is not humiliation but repair. Penalties, grain, linen, labor, bring the pendulum back to center. If the offender is important, the ceremony is stricter, because his blow to measure echoes farther. Court is not a place for shouting, but a workshop of silence. Not everything runs smoothly. Taxes can suffocate. Temple staff can spit toward outsiders. Honest measures can clog under the film of a flood. But the system is built with feedback. Prophetic texts are not end-time oracles, but bitter reminders to officials. If you stop presenting mot on the barque's prow and start presenting noise, the boat will ground. Tales of hungry years have a plain lesson. Even if Sothis sets the new year, a calendar without canal cleaning is paper. Even if a statue is bathed, a priest cannot sing without rations. Thus the engineer and the singer, in Egypt, are partners. A question about women. They are singers, household keepers, leaders of laments, bearers of amulets, linen, food. In the temple, their voices are part of the machine's lubricant. With music, they carry measures from text into body. At home, their work structures time. When to open, when to close, whom to visit, to whom to bring water. In the metaphor we have used, women hold the knots of the net. Without them, corridors sag, and even the best scribe writes for empty walls. Another low-level magic is the household stele of protection, showing Horus the child standing on crocodiles, grasping snakes and scorpions. Not a cartoon, but defense of thresholds and alleys. Clean water, covered pits, a blessed child, an illness named and therefore retreating. In each such stele is the same logic as its state scale. Name, bind, distribute. Egyptians did not luxuriate in abstractions. They translated macro order into the roof and courtyard. To see the measure from another side, look at the calendar. The civil year had 12 months of 30 days and 5 over-the-year days. Its rough simplicity leveled complexity. Feasts tied to dates, works to seasons, courts to days of appearance. The sky helped fine-tune. The heliacal rising of Sothis signaled New Year. Deacons kept night hours. Yet the mentality stayed agrarian. The best calendar is the one people can keep. Finally, the risk of drying up in spirit. When ritual turns to glitter without labor, the temple into a store without distribution, and the pharaoh into a face without a report, the system answers, as in myth. Mot withdraws. The eye runs wild. Ra stalls in the mud. Return to norm is scripted in the work order. Distribute rations. Repair the dike. Hear petitions. Bring out processions. Not for show, but so hands remember the rhythm. Then words begin to gather again. Egypt was resilient not by miracle but by a discipline of return. Even when epochs shifted, capitals moved, or foreign kings sat on the throne, the city opened doors in the morning and shut them at night, and the world came on schedule. Thus, the temple is the metronome, the economy the fuel, scribes the wiring, the pharaoh the conductor. But music exists only if every player knows the part. Egypt learned to tie sacred and useful, so neither injures the other. Divine life was tested by day with market measure, and at night with storeroom lists, human life by festival and court. If we ask why this language remains intelligible, the answer is simple. It speaks of things that do not age. Deadline, ration, water, word, conscience. In the next chapter, we walk the map of gods, not a list of heads and attributes, but an architecture of roles. Who answers for what? Why some gods have dozens of names, and how Egyptian syncretism works. We now have the optics we need. In Egypt, the divine is not only radiance, it is also schedule, budget, and report, which means that while we listen to a hymn, we should also check the scales. 7. Pantheon and faces, roles, names, and the gods' local houses. When people say Egyptian gods, the mind often conjures a catalog: animal heads, crowns, scepters. That's a handy crib sheet, but it misses the point. For Egyptians, a god is not a picture, but a role in a wide system: forces of nature, civic tasks, rhythms of time. The same deity can be solar at dawn, royal at noon, protective in the evening. A goddess gentle at home can turn fierce at the edge of plague. The same power in different places and hours takes different names and epithets, not out of whim, but to switch it on precisely. So instead of listing who looks like what, we'll lay out the architecture of roles and walk it through major figures, fusions, and cities. The images will come alive. You'll see how the god's language runs the country's household, the home, health, and memory. Begin with the principle: appearance signals function. Horus's falcon head isn't ornithological myth, but a sign for vision, height, sky guardianship, accurate strike. Thoth's ibis beak means fine work, writing, calculation. Anubis's jackal is no evil, it's a behavior marker, the animal that knows the necropolis boundary and doesn't confuse living with dead. Bastet's cat is domestic order and soft defense. Sekhmet's lioness is the extreme edge of punishment, which must be returned to healing. When an Egyptian sees these images, he reads an instruction: which god to approach, for what, and with which words. Now to the biggest nodes of the pantheon. Ra, Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, light and the governance of time. Ra has many faces. Khipri at dawn, the scarab rules the disk. Ra-Horakhti at the zenith, sun and skyhawk together. Atum at dusk, completion, seasoned judgment. In Thebes, the hidden one, Amun, fuses with Ra into Amun-Ra invisible framework plus visible light. That isn't theology for its own sake, it's politics and practice. Thebes says its temple holds both the unseen skeleton and the public face of power. The epithets are legion, lord of the thrones of the two lands, he who hears prayers. And they aren't florid padding, they are addresses: flood, birth, justice. Each has a port: Osiris, the ever-living green patron of restoration, lord of the Duat. His body is the Djed pillar, stability, his color a sprout. His white crown marks the Upper Egypt spine of rule. He isn't a grim death god, but the norm of return. Fields in spring, and people with proper burial regain shape. Where he is honored, Abydos and beyond, stelae of presence stand, and Osirian beds are planted baskets of soil where seed sprouts in Osiris's shape. The lesson is for all: Eternity is not a vacation, but regular growth under kept measures. Isis. Mother, speech, the operator of language. She holds a knot, binding fabric, wears a throne, lawful authority, and heals with word. In homes, protective stelae lean on her name to grip harm and shut it down. Later, her cult sails beyond Egypt because she is a born translator. Not narrow, but effective household. Law, sea, birth, hope. She has an address for each. Horus, Fulcan heir and ruler. His Wedjat eye is not only an amulet, but a fractional ruler for dividing rations Egyptian fractions, coded as parts of an eye. Restoring the eye is both a miracle and an economic metaphor. All shares on hand. Horus is lawful power, but lawful needs repair after injury. That repair matters more than loud victories. At Edfu, he is the defender against Seth, the shield of fields and crown. Seth. Desert. Storm. Edge force. His job is to guard the hard places, borders, passes, the sun barque at night. His animal is the unclassifiable Seth beast straight ears, long snout sign of the uncatalogable. Chaos lacks a stable form. Egyptians fit him into the system. Where tough hands are needed, frontier, war, Seth is vital. Where he reaches for court and market, he's sent back to the desert. It's a mature rule. Don't idealize a sign dangerous energy. Anubis, threshold between here and there, master of transition. Everyone who has seen a necropolis knows his name. He is one who leads, the embalmer. At the weighing, he lays heart and feather on the pans. The jackal is competence, reading exits and entrances, living and dead. He is the operator of the doorway, hence his trace in houses of birth and houses of the dead. Thoth. Ibis. Writing. Count. Calendar. His gesture is the pen above the board. His look is fine and cool. He heals Horus's eye, records verdicts, fixes feast days. Thoth is infrastructure of meaning. He embodies Egypt's crucial idea. Justice is measured and written down. His magic is the order of speech and number. Hathor and Sekhmet, two sides of one power. Hathor is love, joy, music, maternity. Her cow is not bucolic kitsch, but the world's nurse. Her sistrum-faced columns ring festivals, washing dust off hearts. Her crowned solar disk and horns shows that warmth and light work together. Sekhmet is the lioness, heat and punishment, needed when pestilence or riot spreads, dangerous if she keeps burning when medicine is due. The tale of intoxication of Sekhmet, rage cooled with red beer, is a state-level SOP. The punitive machine must have a return path to Hathor, or it burns the city. In Memphis, both stand beside Ta, so thought and word govern the switch. Bastet, cat and household, warm safety, the neighborhood. Bubastis is feasts, music, family. Bastet isn't a junior Hathor. She is micro-governance, order indoors, health, children, good terms next door. Her softness is a different kind of strength, restraint. Ta. Memphis builder and architect, creating by heart and tongue. His straight, rapt figure is silent mode of thought. His composite scepter folds Djed, stability, was, authority, and Ankh, life, into one staff. Ptah is the cosmos's project office. To name is to assign function and place. Where there's a workshop, archive, school of scribes, you hear his name. The household gods, not less for daily life. Neith, war and wisdom of Says. Nut, arching sky. Geb, earth father. Mut, Theban mother force. Nekbet and Wadjet, vulture and cobra, two ladies of the two lands. Montu, Theban falcon of war before a moon's rise. Khnum, elephantine potter. Nipre and Renanutet, grain and its guardian. Bes, dwarf protector, house god. Egypt didn't rank gods by snobbery. Great is whoever is needed now. Bess at the mirror's handle saved more nights than a high obelisk saved wars. On syncretism, Egypt didn't lock gods in boxes, it liked articulation. Amun-Ra, we've met. Ta-Sokar Osiris is Memphis's bridge. Design, Ptah. Underworld craft, Sokar. Eternal renewal, Osiris. Moving a mummy to the necropolis, they speak to Ta, give the right word. To Sokar, accept the work of hands. To Osiris, be the ground. Fusion is an interface, the same station staffed by different forces. Later, under the Ptolemies, the blend births Serapis, Osiris Apis seen through Greek optics. But the root is the same, functional assemblies. Local houses of gods, cities as schools. Heliopolis solar city, cosmogony, Ben-Ben, obelisks as cot rays. Priests of light, it taught how to switch on morning and close evening. Memphis Project City, Ptah, Sekhmet, Nefertum, thought punish chuck heel flowering. Craft, archive, court. Theology here is nearly technical. Word, work, rite, account. Thebes city of power and festivals. Amun-Ra, Mut, Khonsu, lunar precision. Later, the brilliant Opet. It perfected hidden strength. You can be strongest and not shout. Abydos, Osiris's port. Memory, presence. Stelae, Osirian beds. Pilgrims came to plug names into the network. Also royal lists, memory trained to order. Bubastis house of Bastet. Women, laughter, home, cats' softness. Feasts are joyful, music bright. Here begins the stair of neighborly care. Edfu Horus's citadel. Long temple texts teach sacred speech and the ritual of defeating danger. Power as a shield for the harvest. Dendera city of Hathor. Star ceilings, late zodiac, music as protocol. Joy is not luxury, it is preventive medicine. Elephantine Aswan gates of Nile water. Khnum molds bodies and Ka. Setet and Anuket manage sources. Water is both deity and accountant. Each house has its calendar. Festivals are public assemblies of roles. Some heal with joy, Hathor, Bastet. Some reflash legitimacy, Opet. Some repair memory, Abydos. Dates are not trivia. They mark who prepares what and which divine channel comes online. Why so many names for one god? To call a function precisely. Ra's hourly names. Amun's hidden, hearing, on the thrones. Isis's great magic. Lady of the stars. Thoth's lord of time. Whispering true names in ritual isn't a game. It's addressing the right port of power. On goddesses, Egypt did not park women at the edge of the sacred. In the house Bastet, Renenutet, Taweret, Hippo mother of childbirth. In the city Hathor, joy and warmth. Mut, motherhood of rule. Neith, wisdom and arms. Isis, speech and protection. They are not sweet, they are operational. Hathor restores when the city is tired. Sekhmet cuts when disease spreads. Isis mediates when quarrels rise. Neith gives the strategic last word. Behind them stand weavers, singers, mourners, healers. Small work fastening the large. Small gods hold up walls. Bez guards the nursery and bed, fends off the eye. Taweret stands at the door of birth. Shai, Lot, and Renenutet, harvest. Advise how much to leave in the bin so you don't eat the seed. Not superstition microeconomics in divine language. A threshold stela with Horus the child crushing snakes and scorpions admits danger is real, but yielding to name and order. The pantheon breathes with politics. In centralizing eras, hidden power grows, Amun-Ra in Thebes. In craft booms, thinking hand rises, Ptah in Memphis. When legitimacy needs renewal, out come Isis and Hathor, whose feasts feed the city's heart. Military ages amplify Montu and Seth aspects. Egypt doesn't reinvent gods each season. It rebalances volumes on the same mixer. The grammar of crowns and signs matters. White crown Upper Egypt, red lower, double union. Uraeus cobra, ready heat, a controlled scorch at enemies. Solar disk in horns, light as nourishment, not glare. Was scepter holding power, crook and flail shepherding, even when it stings. Ankh life, often offered to the nose, breath. These are motion instructions for power, where to hold it, how to direct it, how to apply without burning. On fluid images, the same god may appear human in one scene, animal in another, and wear 20 epithets in one hymn. Not vagueness multi-axis coordinates. Egyptians live among many contours, Nile and desert, morning and night, house and temple, courta and field. One gesture won't do, a set is needed. So Isis is mother, diplomat, mage, Thoth count, script, court. Rascarab child, noon warrior, westering elder. Flat, this god is only X charts kill the working truth. Craft links, the pantheon isn't a sky office, it moonlights on earth. Thoth sits in the scribal school. Ta stands in the shop when the plumb line hums. Hathor smiles in the brewery and music hall. Sekhmet attends clinics. Inscribed statues record cures. Anubis watches the embalmer's tools. Bez grins from a mirror's handle. In Egypt, gods are used, and they don't mind. The language was made for that. How did people pray? Not by confessing moods, but by asking concretely. A flood in measure, heal the child, restore speech, guard a new home, turn down heat. In return, they pledged concretely, I'll bring by the rule, I'll fix the boundary, I'll release a debt, I won't short measure. Private prayer was often an exchange of responsibilities, cut into a stela. A god is a partner, not a prig or a vending machine. Neighbors and translations. Egypt knew how to recognize foreign gods. Greeks later saw Ammon in Zeus, Thoth in Hermes, Isis as a great goddess. Romans adopted Isis and Serapis. But translation did not erase the base grammar. Ma'at, schedule, house temple, word deed. Isis in Delphi, or on a Roman quay, is the same mistress of speech and shelter, dressed in local cloth. 3 small scenes to feel the pantheon breathe. First, morning in Memphis. In the shop, a line of apprentices. Check, master true, linen cords with knots, tiny weights. On the wall, Ptah in relief. The master doesn't chant, he repeats measures. Each cord is a small mot. The boys see, the god made the world as we make a wall project and command. Second, a feast in Dendera. Sistra ring, women sing Hathor, the city smiles. An old woman's brow relaxes, a child long plagued by cough sleeps. Joy isn't entertainment, it's therapy. Sekhmet waits for her hour. Most days, better keep Hathor at the wheel. Third, a necropolis. A family brings water, bread, a papyrus bouquet, and unrolls a name. No sweetness. They serve as a connection. Nearby a stela of Anubis and Horus on crocodiles. Around them, routine. One trims a lamp, another brushes the path. Egyptian paradise is built of small things. Why did this system last so long? Because pantheon, the interface of society. People speak one language for many tasks: governance, court, field, house, health, memory. In crisis, they turn up the channel they need, but use the same words. Ma'at, measure, name, word, schedule. The gods aren't arbiters of taste. They are keepers of habits, without which a large country fails. Their roofs temples are at once universities, warehouses, theaters, and courts. Life in this mesh is not dullness, but the safety of meaning. We are ready to watch Egypt translate itself into new tongues, Ptolemaic and Roman reinterpretations, Hermetic whisper, Isis at sea, Serapis in libraries, symbols, Ankh, Wedjat, Scarab in later light. Heritage is not copying, Egypt knew how to rephrase itself, which is why it lives on in images still. One last word in defense of animal heads. Egyptians did not animalize the world. They trained themselves to recognize. Lion, the limit of force. Cat, the discipline of comfort. Falcon, height and aim. Ibis, the hand that writes true. Think this way and your own life gets clearer. Falcon tasks, cat tasks, lion tasks, ibis tasks, and each needs its mot, its measure and rhythm. Look at a map of Egypt with this optic. Somewhere you'll hear Sekhmet's blow-in epidemic needs strict measure. Elsewhere, Hathor's smile, the city heals itself by feast. In another place, Thoth's whisper court and contract. Ptah's silence project and build. Amun's flare-hidden strength you shouldn't summon for trifles. Bastit's feline step home. Together, they make a panoramic discipline of life that Egypt taught for centuries, without threats, with clear instructions. Next, in the final chapter, we will see how this language didn't vanish with new regimes, but found new mouths and hands. Isis to the harbors, Serapis to the reading rooms, late magical papyri retuning the buttons, and those symbols, Ankh, Wedjat, scarab out living millennia. Heritage is not stasis. Egypt knew how to translate. Fiwetun, legacy, from the Ptolemies to the Mediterranean and to our day. Egyptian mythology rarely ends where historians would set a period. It changes language and clothing while keeping its frame. When Macedonian rulers, the Ptolemies, made Alexandria their capital, and Rome later absorbed the land, it seemed the old gods would cede the stage. Something subtler happened. Egypt switched on translation mode. It did not hide its gods. It took them out to the harbor of a new world, into libraries, markets, theaters, and neighbors' cults, and taught them to speak Greek and Latin without dissolving Egyptian meaning. This final chapter follows how the system endured into late antiquity, spread through the Mediterranean, survived temple closures, blossomed in symbols and ideas, and reaches us in museums, films, and book covers. Start with the Ptolemies, who needed more than army and fleet. They needed legitimacy in the country's own idiom. The answer was syncretism. The showcase example is Serapis, a fusion that combined Osiris and the sacred bull Apis with Greek notes, Pluton, Zeus, Asclepius. The result was a god legible to Egyptian and Greek alike, underworld richness and healing, royal dignity and care. In Alexandria, they raised the Serapeum, not merely a temple, but a cultural hub where theology met philosophy, the library met festivals, and the city met the humanities of the gods. This was not a cosmetic compromise. It was engineering of meanings, acknowledging that forces that govern the world can be named and pictured in different ways and still remain recognizable if one keeps mot measure, rhythm, memory. Alongside Serapis sailed Isis. Her cult moved far beyond the Nile onto Greek islands, into Italian ports, across the empire's cities. Why Isis? Because she is the great translator. Not narrow or local, she is mother and protector, mistress of speech, patron over seas in later hymns, giver of crafts, laws, marriages, and hope. She becomes Lady of 10,000 names, not from vanity, but to address help in varied contexts, saving a ship in storm, guarding a child's health, shutting a liar's mouth, sealing a market contract, warding a house against envy. In Roman towns, her processions, with sistrums and ship masts, were not parades of exoticism, but of openness. The sea is a road along which gods come to people, and people to gods. Look at late statues of Isis with a child, and you see how her image becomes intelligible, even to those who never heard of the duat. A mother holds a child, and, in the same gesture, the world. Alexandria, a laboratory of translation, was more than a temple capital. It was a city of books, reels of papyrus, catalogs and conjectures, shared tables of philosophers and priests. Here appear texts later called Hermetic dialogues and treatises attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, that is, Thoth seen through a Greek lens. Not stage magic, but an attempt to say in a common tongue what Egyptians long said in their own images. The cosmos is living fabric. Word is an instrument. The human stands between earth and sky. The path of purification runs through measure, modesty, knowledge, and exercise. Hermetism isn't Egyptian religion for elites, so much as an ethos where teacher and student practice speech and thought, so that light and shadow, the flowing and the everlasting, can be tuned again. Close to this stand, the Greek magical papyri late antique, handbooks of rites, prayers, and formulae in Greek dotted with Egyptian names and notes. To modern eyes they seem a melange, invocations to Ra and Isis beside long words of power, timing instructions, incense lists, night hours, names of wardens. Step back from the exotic surface, and you see the familiar technique. Address, call forces by their right names. Schedule, hour and month. Measure, how much of what. Purpose, healing. Protection, justice. Late magic doesn't betray Egyptian ethos. It repackages it for people living in an imperial world of markets and courts, where many scribal cultures share a desk. Rome brought a new administrative regime. The emperor's name sat over both Greco-Egyptian temples and legionary camps, and over grain depots feeding the capital. Temples still fed the gods, but ever more in terms of common utility. Storehouses, records, tribunals, roads. Meanwhile, Egypt sailed the Mediterranean as symbol. The Ankh, life, moved on to amulets and wall paintings far from the Nile. The Wedjot, eye of Horus, became a universal sailor's charm. The scarab kept rolling in jewelry. The Djed pillar appeared in decor. None of this is cheap ethnicity. It is trust in working signs, life as measured gift, the eye as memory of wholeness, the pillar as stability. Then came closure. In late antiquity, as Christianity spread, the state shuttered old cults. Temples were closed, priesthoods dismissed, the House of Life with its copying schools and medicine lost standing. Yet even here, the end was a translation. Religious energy flowed into another language: Coptic, Christian, monastic. No wonder early Egyptian Christians prized ascesis, a people trained in ritual discipline, recognized in monastic order, the familiar props hours of prayer, labor, truthful word, mercy, as the return path of punishment. Old holy places sometimes became new sanctuaries. Old images took on new meaning. Star ceilings were no longer painted, but prayer hours remained. Sacrifice gave way to alms and the bread of love feasts. Incense smoke still wound through courtyards. The old city did not die. It was renovated. The language itself made a last turn, from hieroglyphs to Demotic, from Demotic to the Coptic alphabet, Greek letters with added signs for Egyptian sounds. Not forgetting, but inventory. Hieroglyphs stayed with stone, Demotic with business, Coptic with letters, hymns, homilies. The language that had been the ritual machine became the machine of community parish and monastery. It still bore the Egyptian premise that words do not merely express, they do. Some temples lasted very late on Philae. Hymns to Isis still sounded when the empire had changed face. Late sanctuaries at Dendera and Edfu read like encyclopedias of the final Egyptian centuries. How to stage festivals, heal a city with music, rear a king, compute stars. Sunset here is not emptiness, but a hurried rebinding of books for a long trip. What became of the heritage after closures? It's stratified. One layer went into books' commentaries, mythographic handbooks by Greek and Roman authors. Another spread into practice home charms, healing texts, architectural habits. A third condensed into symbols that outlived politics. Ankh as life, Wedjat as seeing, Scarab as work of light. A fourth entered ethics without calling itself Egyptian, the habit of coupling rhythm and measure, festival and work, word and deed. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, Egypt was approached through Plato and the Hermetica, for some birthplace of wisdom, for others a treasury of symbols. In the modern age, soldiers, traders, scholars, and artists carried obelisks, sphinxes, and papyri to Europe. Egyptomania became both a fashion and a science Egyptology. Even when salons used Egypt as exotic backdrop, the old signs quietly reasserted their meanings: stability, memory, schedule, joy. It is telling that the most durable images are practical. The ankh fits the hand as mirror handle, pendant, breath loop held to the nose. The wedjat is a simple drawing disc, tail, line, tear, and thus easily recognized. The scarab suits stone, clay, and wood alike. The djed is stability distilled 4 crossbars and a shaft. Such forms survive not because they are mystical, but because they sit on elemental gestures: to hold, to see, to live, to stand. On the level of ideas, Egypt left another gift: respect for protocol as a form of freedom. Hermetic writings speak of purification as work quieting inner voices, straightening speech, learning to listen. Coptic desert fathers say much the same in different words. Late magical papyri specify conditions, times, formulas, not say this and it happens, but live thus and speech gains efficacy. This discipline of a word that both sounds and does is Egyptian in spirit even when phrased in Greek. Some claim Egypt ended, yielding to more developed religions and cultures. The land itself answers otherwise. In Luxor and Karnak, you can still watch light enter deep rooms on set days. At Edfu and Dendera, you can still read instructions for healing a city with music and joy. At Philae, you can still feel the docking of water, stone, and word under open sky. In Cairo and along the Nile, ritual rhythms live on, markets open with precision, crafts keep time, festivals stitch seasons. Ignore the signboards and watch the habits. Do things on time, in measure. Name things rightly. Remember names. Mend dikes, physical and moral. In modern museums, Egypt speaks to us in 2 voices. One is the object stone, metal, wood, statuettes, vessels, amulets, stelae. The other is the label, the guide's voice. The first requires hand and eye, the second ear and memory. Together they continue the Egyptian rule: image plus word. Work. 40 seconds before a wedjat, and you recall the whole lesson about restored wholeness, fractions, justice. 10 minutes beneath a star ceiling, and you begin to hear the night's hours. Watch a child sketch an ankh, and you grasp that this is not some ancient thing, but a handy alphabet for the ageless. Another path is art and film. They often turn Egypt into mystery for mystery's sake, yet even then the old logic shows through. A large country reveres order and rhythm, curses in stories, reduced to broken protocols and unpaid debts of the living to the dead. Where scripts are more attentive, real Egyptian structures surface. Judgment as weighing, leadership as presentation of mot, joy as medicine rather than exhaustion. The right close is not nostalgia but knowledge. Egyptian mythology is not museum hush, but a technology of long civic life. It teaches that the world must be maintained, not merely explained. It translates cosmos into schedule and ritual back into ethics. Don't lie. Don't short measure. Don't stop water. Remember names. support the weak, know how to stop the punisher and turn her into a healer. It respects joy as prevention of decay and discipline as guarantee of morning light. It does not sneer at craft, because no bark of Ra rose without hands. It believes in word, but knows word is truthful only alongside deed. If one formula sums all our chapters, it is this. Maat is a compact between people and the world about mutual carefulness. Egyptians believed this compact must be renewed by a temple morning, a daylight court, the checking of measures, a festival, a libation at a tomb's threshold, a name pronounced without error. While the compact lives, the world lives. When it is forgotten, Apophis rises. Then you need once more the crew that can bind, cut, name, persuade, build. What in this legacy matters most today? Not an exotic garnish, but the skill of reconciliation. Light with shadow, home with temple, feast with ledger, border with hospitality, punishment with mercy. That skill makes cultures long-lived. It is not for sale. It must be rehearsed daily, just as Egyptians rehearsed. Open, cleanse. Name, present Maat. Close. Hand the night to those who know how to hold the dark and greet dawn with a clean bowl.